Today on CityCast Denver. What if there was a job where you got to be outside all day, hanging out with cool people in one of the most beautiful places in the world?
It would be doing trail restoration work. It would be, folks going up to Rocky Mountain National Park and helping the superintendent there with the massive amount of deferred maintenance, the backlog that exists.
Congressman Joe Neguse is backing a new proposal to bring back one of America's most celebrated programs, a civilian climate corps that would pay people to make Colorado and the rest of the country a little greener.
The idea was to sort of build out a 21st century version of the CCC to address a confluence of challenges that we face today as a country.
Today is Monday, June 14th, 2021. I'm Paul Caroli, and this is CityCast Denver. All right, let's see what's happening out there today. It looks like we can expect clear skies and sun all day with a high near 98. And this heat is sticking around. Don't be surprised if we hit 100 later in the week. The slow-motion car wreck that is Tay Anderson's 2021 has taken another upsetting turn. Late last week, past and future CityCast Denver guest Melanie Asmar reported a new allegation of inappropriate conduct against the 22-year-old school board member. Yes, another one. This one comes in the form of a letter sent to the Denver Teachers Union in 2019, before they endorsed his run for the school board that year. The letter reportedly did not mention the kind of sexual assault that the other, more recent allegations against Anderson have revolved around, but it did outline a relationship in which the writer did not feel safe with Anderson. The union's president says that the letter was, quote, nebulous and unsubstantiated, and apparently Anderson addressed it to the union's satisfaction at the time. However, it's yet another troubling allegation against the ambitious young politician. He's still denying everything, and the district's investigation is ongoing. They say they'll have a full report ready by the end of the summer. Oh, and one more quick thing. As of yesterday, there are no more occupancy limits on RTD buses and trains. Previously, they were capping ridership to help maintain physical distancing, but no more. So those buses are going to be full again just in time for the unseasonably hot weather we're getting this week. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt walked out in front of the U.S. Capitol to take the oath of office on March 4th, 1933, the country was in terrible shape. The Great Depression was raging, the unemployment rate was over 25%, and Americans all across the country twisted the dials of their radios to hear what he was going to do about it.
This is no unsolvable problem if we face it wisely and courageously. It can be accomplished in part by direct recruiting by the government itself, treating the task as we would treat the emergency of a war, but at the same time, through this employment, accomplishing greatly needed projects to stimulate and reorganize the use of our great natural resources.
And now, almost 100 years later, as America once again finds itself in dire straits, with our economy depressed and climate catastrophe looming, the Democrats in Washington are looking back to FDR for inspiration.
Paul, if I'm just going to interrupt you for just a second, I'm sorry. Could we just stop for 1 minute?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Sorry, okay, can you hear me okay? My wife and 3-year-old daughter just came home, so you might have heard her in the background. I wanted to make sure.
Oh no, that's okay. That's Zoom life for you. Joe Neguse represents District 2 as Colorado's first black congressman. And since he was elected in 2018, he's already made his mark in Washington, serving as a manager of former President Trump's second impeachment trial earlier this year. But now, Neguse has shifted his gaze to the future, with a proposal to bring back one of the most popular New Deal-era programs, the Civilian Conservation Corps. Only Neguse's 21st century version is called the Civilian Climate Corps, and it comes with a greater sense of urgency to address wildfires, drought, and everything else climate change is making worse in Colorado and the rest of the country. I think we have to start with the Civilian Climate Corps itself. Can you explain what this program is?
Sure. So the Civil Conservation Corps, I'm sure some of your listeners will be familiar with the program of the 1930s. Back during the depths of the Great Depression, then President Franklin Delano Roosevelt came up with the program as a way to address mass unemployment and the need to invest resources in our public works projects. And so the program at that time employed millions of young men across the country doing different type of work, including right here in Colorado. You can see the remnants of the Civil Conservation Corps from the 1930s at Red Rocks, best music venue in the world, as far as I'm concerned. Of course, I'm biased, but that architectural masterpiece was literally built by the workers in the Civil Conservation Corps. And you can go today to the camp, Mount Morrison, the conservation camp that's still managed by the Denver Parks Department, and you can see the barracks where these folks lived as they did this important work. So that is the Civil Conservation Corps of the 1930s. Our program is a reimagining of that program. The idea was to sort of build out a 21st century version of the CCC to address a confluence of challenges that we face today as a country. Of course, the employment challenges and the need to ensure that the economic recovery that we're now experiencing as a result of COVID-19 extends to all Americans. Second, wildfires, the great wildfire risk that we face in the Rocky Mountain West, my district being the epicenter of the two largest wildfires in Colorado history just last year. And then third, and of course interconnected to the wildfire risk, is the existential threat of climate change and the reality that climate change continues to barrel towards us and the very short runway that we have to take decisive steps to curb emissions and save our planet. And so in light of all of those challenges, our thought was that the CCC model provided a real great template for us to address these crises. And in short, it's as I said, kind of taking a page out of FDR's playbook and applying it to the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part I want to talk about. That's what gets me excited, is that historical connection. It's so fascinating. I mean, you said you were out visiting one of the old camps near Morrison recently. How did that feel? What did you see?
It's pretty incredible. I mean, I've been to Red Rocks many times for concerts and shows, but I had never been to the camp. And to be able to have the opportunity to, as I said, see some of the historical artifacts from that time, to literally see the barracks where these guys slept and, working long days out in the outdoors, building Red Rocks and doing other important outdoor projects, to be able to see the legislation itself. So the original bill, signed by President Roosevelt 90 some odd years ago, back in the 1930s, creating this program, and to think about, that bill in the context of the work that we are now doing today. And it was just, tremendous to be able to take in that history and to reflect on all the work that had been done by, preceding generations to, in effect, build the modern infrastructure of our country, including public lands infrastructure. And as I think about this in the context of being a young father and the world that my 3-year-old daughter will inherit, I don't know that our generation and that it has lived up to our obligations to do the same for her generation and the generations that will follow. And I think the Climate Conservation Corps is a great way to accomplish that.
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to dig in here on what these jobs would be. We've been talking a lot on the show lately about the so-called labor shortage and like service jobs not being appealing enough for people to actually want to go and try to get and do these days. What's an example of a job that somebody in this civilian climate corps would be doing? And how would they be paid?
Yeah, so a great example would be the wildfire resiliency and mitigation work that I described. So taking you back to October of last year, the Cameron Peak Fire, which many of your listeners no doubt will remember well, was raging in my district in northern Larimer County, devastating parts of our community. Earlier this year, just a few weeks ago, actually, I had a chance to go and take the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack, on a tour of the burn scar that was left after the Cameron Peak Fire in Larimer County, and to visit with local landowners, with community stakeholders and others about the scale, just the sheer volume of work that is now necessary in those areas to ensure that we restore our community, right? So the practical example of what some folks would be doing as part of the CCC, the 21st Century CCC, would literally be working on reforestation in that area, right? It would be addressing fuels in other parts of the Arapahoe Roosevelt Forest, just as an example, right? It would be doing trail restoration work and trail maintenance work up in that area. It would be, folks going up to Rocky Mountain National Park and helping the superintendent there with the massive amount of deferred maintenance, the backlog that exists up there from a construction standpoint and, as I said, maintenance standpoint.
Yeah. So someone in Denver could get one of these jobs and
Yes.
find themselves working out in the forest somewhere and developing a connection to nature.
That's precisely right, which is actually a part of it that I didn't really talk much about, but that it's, of course, when you read the stories from participants in the CCC program 90 years ago and about how important it was for them, particularly at a young age, as they developed this kindred connection to the land by virtue of the work they were doing, I think there's a real opportunity to replicate that today in 2021.
And that I think gets to something that I'm guessing you want to change from that old program, because the original Conservation Corps was almost entirely white men. And that was a lot of white men developing these connections with nature and then going on and feeling all those good feelings. How are you and your colleagues thinking about that equity component and maybe helping people of color develop some of those same connections?
It is a salient point and something that I spent a great deal of time thinking about, Paul, because as you said, the CCC of the 1930s, while it was an incredibly effective program and a program that we are obviously eager to model our program upon, it was exclusionary and did not include women and minorities across the country. And so our thought is that we have, again, this opportunity to build a more inclusive CCC for 2021, for the 21st century. But, I'd also say, just apart from the workforce equity considerations that you mentioned, there's also a real need to invest in ensuring that there's broader access to the outdoors among diverse communities in our country. According to one poll I had seen, 1 in 10 kids, 10% of kids said that they spend time outdoors every day. And so you think about the plethora of young people that aren't getting outdoors, and of course the reality that in urban areas, poor public transportation can make it harder to get to parks and to open spaces, and there are less urban parks available for them to be able to enjoy. So our bill actually works to try to address some of those barriers. It redoubles an investment in the Every Kid Outdoors program, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with, but that provides fourth graders across the country, family members, free access to over 2,000 federal lands. So we're trying to kind of plus up investments in that regard as well, not just on the workforce side.
Okay, so let's talk about the politics part a little bit. I saw President Biden has come out in support of this. He set aside, or he called for $10 billion over 10 years, I think, to fund the program. What about your colleagues in Congress? Where are we at? Are people excited about this?
Yeah, well, I'd say a couple of things. First, the most exciting development by far was the president's announcement, because the $10 billion investment that he's called for, it matches the $10 billion investment that myself and Senator Wyden have called for. So essentially, endorsement of our bill and our proposal, which on Capitol Hill, I haven't been there long, but I've learned that having the support of the president for a particular bill or resolution certainly makes a world of difference in terms of seeing that legislation get across the finish line. So that's a great positive step. I would say that the concept as a whole has also received experienced a lot of momentum over the course of the last several months, in part because I think it's captured the imagination of the American people. As people read more about the CCC of the 1930s and about our plans for this particular program, they become more excited about the potential for us to actually make this a reality. And I think that's reflected in most of the empirical polling data I've seen about this particular plan. So we're pretty excited about the future. There are a lot of different CCC proposals out there. We've authored 2 ourselves in our office, and so none of them are mutually exclusive. I think provided we can get some seed funding through this $10 billion capital investment I think that will be a large step forward. And I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get that done this summer as part of the infrastructure bill that is moving its way through Congress right now.
Okay, Joe, we've been talking a lot about the politics around the climate and some heavy stuff. Let's end on a more fun note. I know you grew up here in Colorado. Do you have a favorite way to enjoy the outdoors during the summer? Maybe a hike or a campground you'd recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Colorado, as you know. I moved here when I was 6, and I've never left. And so we have many fond memories growing up of going camping, of hiking with my dad in Rocky Mountain National Park, and of course now being able to have the privilege to represent the park in the Congress and to take my daughter Natalie to the park to be able to hike is just is something I treasure deeply. So I'm not going to reveal my favorite hikes, because I don't, I'll keep those in secret. But yeah, Indian Peaks Wilderness, I'm very fond of Rocky Mountain National Park. It's one of my favorite, of course.
Yeah, I hear you. And that's a true Coloradan would never reveal the best hike, the best campground. Well, Joe, thanks so much for being on CityCast Denver.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's all for us today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell a friend about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Until then, hope you have a great day. What's a pithy way to say that?